regardless of if you have ADHD or not, or subclinical ADHD, it's still going to have an effect.
And it's interesting you should say that, actually, because this paper, to kind of bring it all back around, is about subclinical ADHD, which is the one that people are potentially less likely to be managing because they didn't even know that they had it in the first place.
In this episode, we're going to be discussing a paper called The Effects of Subclinical ADHD Symptomatology on Subjective Financial, Physical, and Mental Well-Being of Entrepreneurs and Employees. And this study looks at how subclinical ADHD traits relates to well-being for two groups, entrepreneurs and employees, asking, does having ADHD traits help or hurt you more when you're your own boss versus when you're working for someone else? And so I think a great place for us to start this is to discuss what subclinical ADHD is, because I'm sure a lot of people are not really familiar with this term.
And in fact, this paper came about because we were looking for a paper on subclinical ADHD specifically, because it is something that has been discussed more and more. And perhaps it might not have made it, I think, to, social media or anything like that, but there is more of a conversation now about what if you don't meet the criteria of ADHD, but you have ADHD symptoms, which is a very new concept to be talking about, because we just started talking about ADHD.
But I think it's also this is especially, I think, important in regards to people that are doing like self-diagnosis and these ideas, because when we're looking at ADHD, there is a line of where you can be diagnosed and where you can't be diagnosed. Whereas they're like, yeah, you have, can't remember, is it like 5 of 7
Something
of
like
the
that. It's
symptoms,
different
right?
when you're an older person, I think.
Yeah, but so if then you have 4 of the 7, they'd say, can't diagnose you. And that's where this idea of subclinical might come in, where it's like you do have a lot of ADHD symptoms, but not a clinical level. It's not the same kind of diagnosis then.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that this conversation comes up in a paper about entrepreneurship, because, I work exclusively these days with entrepreneurs who have ADHD symptoms. And the reason we talk about it as ADHD symptoms is because so many people will come to me and say, well, I don't know if I haven't been diagnosed. I don't know if I will be diagnosed, but I definitely resonate with the symptoms. So it was when I saw that there was a paper that kind of did the same thing, but in an academic context, I was like, oh, okay, this is not just me. This is actually a thing that's coming up in the research.
Yeah, and this, it was reminding me of another paper that we went over recently that talked about if you were a kid with a diagnosis but they didn't keep that diagnosis out, you still had the worst life outcomes. Even if you don't have the ADHD diagnosis, if you have this symptomatology, we'll talk about the paper, but you still have worse outcomes.
Which is a bit brutal. Gosh, it makes me glad that I got the diagnosis and it was across the line. Because it would be so frustrating to have subclinical ADHD and still have the outcomes.
And it's also like I've talked a bit before with on the podcast that I have subclinical autism diagnosis, because and that makes a lot more sense with how strict the diagnostic criteria for autism is. ADHD is a little bit looser because of the different presentations. It is something where I'm just like, it makes it hard to talk about when I'm like going, well, I have subclinical autism, and people are like, does that mean you don't have it? I'm like, yes, but also no.
But like one of those questions was about trains, and I just didn't, because I've done the test before, and I'm not a math person or a numbers person, and so a lot of those questions were about like, do you like systems? And I was like, I know.
Yeah, it is always funny with like some of the questions on there where they, especially for like the autism diagnosis, where you're like, yes, but also, and it's like a multiple choice thing, and you're like, how do I answer this? And apparently that is part of the point. When they go through the assessment with you, if you are bringing up further things, they want to know that.
Interesting. Well, I have ADHD. There's no way I'm not going to bring up further things. It's literally built into the diagnosis, I'm sure.
Yeah. So they want that interaction to have better understanding of like, do you enjoy being at parties or being at the library? They want you to expand on that, because that gives them a better understanding. At least I should say some clinicians want you to do that.
Just
I'm
want
sure
to get
there's
through
others
their
that
day. Yeah, I'm like, well, you could have a library, a reading party. I've done those before. Anyway, we are getting so far away from the point of this paper.
Yeah. All right, let's go into the methodology that we
So if we look at the methodology, basically what they're looking at is, well, if we go to the theory, they're looking at this idea of the demands, abilities, fit dimension, which is the degree to which individual abilities comply with the demands of the work environment. So the first thing they want to know is, are you in a position where your ability is matched with the work environment that you're in? And the idea is that if it is, then you're going to be happier. And then they also talk about this idea of needs, abilities, fit, but we'll come into that in a second.
Or needs supplies.
Yes.
This paper has a lot of terminology that's like, okay, we got to make sure we
Yeah,
know exactly what we're
it
talking
definitely had
about.
a lot of terminology. But in terms of materials, they used a randomly selected sample of 190 entrepreneurs and 186 organizational employees. So respondents were considered entrepreneurs if they were partially or fully owned a venture and participated in its management and decision-making process, which, seems right. And then the sample recruitment and interviews were conducted by a market research company, et cetera, et cetera. And it was people between the ages of 18 and 65. So it was quite a broad sample. They said it was unrepresentative of the population of Hungary, which is where the study was done, but they did try and get as many different people as possible. And there was quite a large number in terms of the numbers that they got.
Yeah, almost 400 people
Yeah,
is
they really
quite
went for
good.
it. And in terms of the actual ADHD symptomology, they did a 12-item test questionnaire. So they asked questions like, do you feel restless all the time? Do you not enjoy doing quiet leisure activities? Things like that. So they basically asked, some ADHD symptomology questions. And they also asked questions about your subjective income perception. How comfortable are you on the income that you have? How satisfied are you with your life nowadays? How anxious did you feel yesterday? Things like that as well, to kind of get a sense of where you felt you were at. So a lot of this was subjective. A lot of this was like where you feel you're at, not necessarily where you're actually at.
Sometimes feels like a bad distinction, but it is a very important, like how
Yes.
you feel
Yeah.
is a very represented. Like it doesn't really matter if you got 8 hours of sleep if you
Yes,
feel
yeah,
tired.
it's a big in conversation in psychology is this idea of, if you're in a society, for example, that's very stratified, you will tend to feel worse than if you're in a society that's less stratified. And it might even be that you would have done better in the more stratified society. So things like that come up in psychology all the time.
Yeah, the other example I can think of here is like satisfied what your income is based on
Exactly.
what your
Yeah.
neighbor has. So even if you are making a very good income, but your neighbor is making more, you might feel
Exactly,
worse about
exactly.
it.
So this is kind of the subjective concept, and we'll talk about that in terms of entrepreneurship in a minute, because I do think that that might potentially had an effect. But what did they find?
Well, they found ADHD traits negatively affect almost every aspect of
Yay!
well-being.
Sometimes these games are brutal.
Worse physical health, lower happiness, worse subjective financial well-being, higher anxiety, lower life satisfaction, although that one was probably the least representative. While that is an interesting thing to like start with, I wonder if this is something where if we looked at well-managed ADHD, if that
Yeah, well,
changes
I think
things.
this is the thing. The reason I wanted to bring this particular paper in subclinical ADHD is this is very, very close to the reason I get up in the morning, if that makes sense, which is to, on some level, fight against this concept that ADHD people have worse outcomes. Because I do believe, and I have seen in my own life and in the lives of other people, that well managed ADHD in environments, and they do talk about the benefits of the entrepreneurial environment specifically, can have really good outcomes, and I've seen those good outcomes happen. But it's if you just put somebody in an environment that isn't built for them, you don't give them any tools, and you say, oh, look at that, the demand fit isn't working very well, then you're probably right, yes.
Yeah, if I took my cat to the doggy daycare for the day, my cat would have a terrible time because that's not the
Exactly,
right place for
exactly.
it.
So as much as they did talk about, and they did go into it, and they referenced a few academics that I'd actually spoken with before, and connected with before on these topics, the benefits of entrepreneurship spaces for people with ADHD versus workplaces, because it is more flexible and you have the ability to have more novelty. They didn't really go into the idea that you still need to have systems that work for these particular spaces. And did the people that they were talking to have this, or were they just in this position? And they kind of reference this idea of like, but now you do have to manage yourself, and that's more difficult. And that's very true.
Yeah, they found like, yeah, entrepreneurs were hit a lot harder by the income perception, which, makes sense. If you're running your own business, you probably are a lot more aware of what your financials are doing. Because you're like, I have to, if this fails, the business closes.
Yeah. Also, you're seeing a lot more stratification, again, to that conversation before. You're hanging out with entrepreneurs that have $1 million or $2 million. Like, a lot of entrepreneurship is about looking at people who are doing better than you and getting advice from them. So it doesn't necessarily, mean that you're yeah, like you said, you're just more aware of it.
Hey, Skye here, jumping in to tell you about a workshop that we are running this week. So, if you are a business owner and you feel like you don't understand the core of your business, you feel like you're scaling complexity, you feel like you really want to clarify who's responsible for which part of your business as it grows, we're going to be running a practical hands on workshop with me where you're going to be able to work on building your own business pipeline so that you can see the business and you can walk away with something that you can use immediately. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like you're starting to scale chaos, click the link below and check out the workshop.
I was interested with the feeling worse physically, like the entrepreneurs feeling worse physically than employees, because this made me wonder about what kind of entrepreneurs are they looking at here? Are they looking at like, the Silicon Startup Valley kind of people, I mean, I know this isn't Hungary, but or is this, people just running their own dry cleaner or something?
That's a good point because I work with a lot of people who work in trades. A lot of entrepreneurs who work in trades struggle with ADHD symptoms. And a lot of the conversations we have is I have to get off the tools because this is going to hurt my body or is hurting my body to a point where I need to build those new systems. And again, the systems that you had when you were in your 20s and you could just do it yourself versus the systems you had in your 30s are really, really different. They did find one thing. They said higher ADHD symptomology may fit entrepreneurship better than employment on the needs supplies dimension. So do you want to take us through what that meant?
Yeah, well, so to just further remind it, like the need supplies was this, like how well the job provides you with these things for you mentally need, like autonomy, novelty, flexibility, and stimulation. And so finding that for entrepreneurs makes a lot of sense because you are getting novelty and autonomy and all these things that you really want. There are certain aspects of entrepreneurship where you definitely don't get that, even though if you feel like you should, where you're like, well, I have to do my taxes, and that feels awful. Not because I don't want to pay my taxes, but just because they're complicated. I don't like. Does not have a lot of novelty and it has a lot of novelty, but not the stimulation part of the novelty.
Yeah, definitely. So there was some there, but yeah, as they pointed out, it's not all that. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why I often recommend, and you'll hear this again, advice for entrepreneurs with ADHD is different from advice for people who are entrepreneurs with ADHD because we are different. And so, for example, one of the recommendations that I make is hire an assistant as soon as possible to help you with some of those, more admin-y tasks. And a lot of times you'll hear of entrepreneurs who don't have ADHD say hire an assistant as late as possible, or there'll be $1 million businesses that don't have an assistant because they're like, well, I'm pretty good at those admin tasks. I need to hire someone to come up with a creative vision in marketing, places like that. So again, it's like this was an interesting conversation because it was like they wanted to understand something and they did, but they didn't have like maybe a full understanding of why they were getting the results that they were getting.
I mean, I think this is a first step to being like, oh yeah, we are seeing these worth outcomes. Let's explore why. I mean, they did have, some suggestions of what they were finding and why, but there's no, like, you don't have any, like, evidence of that yet.
Exactly. And a lot of papers are like this. A lot of papers will go in and they will look at something and they'll be like, that's not good. And then they'll just kind of leave. and when you have ADHD, one of the things we were just talking about before we jumped on air is like, it can be really brutal reading these papers. People often talk to me and talk to us about, oh, well, did you find this in a paper? This system, this strategy kind of like presented to you. And the answer is absolutely not. Most of the papers were very negative, and then you had to kind of like look within them to see, oh, that is interesting. They did find this. I wonder if it's affecting this. It kind of gives you clues to find the next paper and so on.
Yeah, like because we can see like, okay, well, life satisfaction is buffered by entrepreneurship, and we can see, oh, well, the reasons of that, are that like, oh yeah, we got the autonomy, the novelty, we're very self-directed, and then that is something that we can then further apply to how could we apply that to an employee? There are ways as employees that you can ask your boss for that
exactly.
kind of thing.
And with the ADHD side of it, okay, well, if we're getting this novelty and that's what we want, then how can we make the business continue to have those benefits? And how can we reduce the difficulties, the admin side, the boring side, the routine side? That is very much what I teach, and one of the things that it was interesting to see come up in this paper.
Yeah, I mean, it is very interesting because we did get this like, oh yeah, very typically we think of entrepreneurship as a clear path for ADHD, but it does have real hardship associated with it as well.
It really does. And, I mean, I was curious about this because you've been an entrepreneur for a little while. What resonated or didn't resonate with you? in this paper.
I mean, most of the idea, like, I'm like, yeah, I've definitely felt the, like financial hardships where you're like, even though I'm doing fine, it's just like, oh, I could be doing more. There's things that I was thinking about with like, oh yeah, worse health outcomes. If you don't set boundaries early on in your entrepreneurship journey, it can be easy to be like, I got an email at 11:30 and this person wants me to do something. I'm going to take care of it right now. Whereas now in my life, I'm like, I wouldn't even know if I got an email at 11:30. I'm not checking my email at that time. There's never been a time when I checked my email past my working hours that I've ever been happy about it.
Yeah, no, definitely.
To me, it felt very similar to a number of studies where you've seen where this is the base outcome, but if you apply good ADHD management strategies and are not being run by your ADHD, then you probably don't have those same outcomes.
And it's interesting you should say that, actually, because this paper, to kind of bring it all back around, is about subclinical ADHD, which is the one that people are potentially less likely to be managing because they didn't even know that they had it in the first place.
Regardless of if you have ADHD or not, or subclinical ADHD, it's still going to have an effect.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part about it. People say, oh, well, I didn't get the diagnosis, and so should I get support? And executive functioning support is great for so many people. I highly recommend it just as a way of being if the way that you're currently being doesn't feel like it fits you.
I mean, because I've talked to so many people where they're like, I don't know if I really have ADHD. And even people that have been diagnosed where they're like, maybe I'm just faking it. And I'm like, well, are the things you're doing helping your brain? And they're like, yes. And then I'm like, well, it doesn't matter then. Your diagnosis doesn't matter if what you're doing is helping.
Especially because, we're talking about different ways of using the Pomodoro method to manage your transition times. You know what I mean? Like, it is okay to be like, that system doesn't work for me because 5-minute transitions aren't really my bag. I'm never going to transition that fast. Like, things like that are so fine. And when I worked with governments, the first thing everyone said when I told them the systems and strategies is like, oh, this would be really helpful for everybody, at certain times of the day, at certain times of the week. And that is very, very true. So if anything, this paper, if we think about what we can take away from this, it's an invitation to consider doing things in a different way, because you can hold yourself to a really high standard where you go, well, I got the diagnosis or I took the test and I didn't hit the criteria, so therefore all of this support is closed off to me. You can have that feeling. But these papers are not doing that. They're thinking about subclinical ADHD, so maybe we should as well.
Thank you for listening, and a big thank you to Adam for making us sound great, Anastasia for making us look great, and Jess for putting it all together. We couldn't do it without you. If you want to find out more about us, or you want to deep dive into ADHD strategies, particularly for business owners, you can find us on Instagram at Unconventional Organization. That is where the community is. That is where we are chatting. You can see all the fun and exciting things that we're bringing to the table there. So please go find us. DM me any questions, any thoughts you have. I always like talking with you guys. See you soon.